Our favorite day of the week at yet another DC animated podcast is game night,
Although we usually play the Batman version of Monopoly,
where literally everything is owned by Bruce Wayne.
we also like jumping over to the Marvel Universe and playing Marvel Dice Throne.
Marvel Dice Throne is a fast and fun board game for all ages. Each player selects one of 8 heroes to face off in a head-to-head battle to see who earns the right to take the throne.
Gameplay involves strategically rolling a dice to activate special abilities, playing unique hero cards to manipulate results, and upgrading your hero board to power up your stats.
This is currently being crowdfunded on Kickstarter and will have Kickstarter exclusives.
So go there now to reserve your copy.
This is yet another
DC Animated Podcast. Welcome to yet another episode of yet another DC Animated Podcast. My name is Shamar Griffith, codename Comic Shams.
And I am Andrew Tejada, codename Arate.
Andrew and I have known each other since 1996.
That was the year of the debut studio album from Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, 1996.
That reference I got.
Yeah.
That one I got for our static episodes. Well, episodes, because today we're talking about 3 episodes in particular. The next one in our series, we're talking about episode 5, They're Playing My Song, which is written by Milestone Media co-founder Dwayne McDuffie. There's a lot of just like heavy,
Yes.
heavy rap influences in there. Next, we got The New Kid, which, again, was directed by another Milestone co-founder, Dennis Cowan. And finally, we're wrapping it all up with Child's Play. There will be no Chucky in this episode, as far as I know.
Yeah, not yet, guys. The Static Chucky crossover, you never know. You never know.
I mean, Mark Hamill does make an appearance at some point in the Static episode.
He's the bridge between the worlds.
Oh, gosh. Did we just create the Hamillverse?
Yes, it should be out there. Hamillverse confirmed.
So our main cast is back with Static, Richie, Sharon, and Richard Hawkins. Edwin Alva also comes back. We got Goldar making the return here. But our special guests for these episodes are Once in a Different World. He had the most iconic glasses ever, as we have Kadeem Hardison voicing Adam Evans, a.k.a. the Rubber Band Man in our first episode. Next, we have Libby Fulfax from Jimmy Neutron, but her real name was Crystal Scales, and she is voicing Daisy in The New Kid. Also, fun fact, Andrew, do you remember the game Celebrity Deathmatch?
I do.
She voiced Little Romeo.
Oh, sure. Like, what? That's some trivia for you guys that I would never have made that connection.
And it's going to come full circle in this season of our show, too. And then finally, we got wrapping up in Child's Play. We have, he once was the first live action Ant-Man, as we have Garrett Morris voicing the preacher in the beginning of the episode. And our last 2, which is kind of really cool to find this out because they have such a connection to the Marvel and the DC universe. Patton Oswalt and Michael Rosenbaum are Specs and Trapper in the New Kid episode.
That makes so much sense. Well, you'll find out why soon, but it makes so much sense.
But let's start off with our first episode with They're Playing My Song, the inspiration of our 1996 reference of this week.
Yes, because today, in this first episode, they take on an ancient evil, which is record executives, and Rubber Band Man contorts himself into a ball and sneaks into a record executive's office. And immediately you see how cool this guy's powers are. The range of what Rubber Band Man can do with his abilities, he's taking full advantage. And as soon as he unrolls himself and starts beating up this record executive mercilessly, the record executive is shook. And you find out somebody stole something from the Rubber Band Man, and he's after the thief who stole. What did they steal? You're still going to find out in literally 3 seconds, but it is a great and effective opening to Rubber Band Man, seeing his range, how quickly he can scare people, and that he wants something back from that was stolen from him.
Yes, and the next person on the journey to find out, get Rubber Band Man back his cred we head on over to Ice-T. No, Tupac. No,
Ice Pack.
Ice Pack. Yes. Who is in his limo jamming out to his song. He's got some groupies and some people in the car with him. And as that same moment happens of him just like jamming out to his stuff, his driver's like, yo, there's somebody following us. And that's when they find out it's Rubber Band Man, who's bouncing along the streets, catching up to them in this limo, where we now jump to Virgil and Richie, who are walking the streets as well. I guess like a couple blocks away, because they head on over to an abandoned gas station.
Yes, the gas station of solitude. Because Richie said, hey, look, there's a couple rats, but no one's going to come back and fix this. So it's like, why don't we stay here? Virgil, this is one of my favorite little interactions, because Virgil's like, oh, we need money for a real bass. But he also is like, I need money because my costume keeps tearing and my shoes keep burning through. So I'm like, I like talking about how much it costs to be a superhero when you're just a regular dude.
Yo, word. And I was mostly worried because I was just like, if Virgil is wearing Jordans out here as Static.
Got to do it for the aesthetic. Got to do it for the fans.
As they're at this abandoned gas station of solitude that has no door, they hear the car driving away as they see Rubber Band Man bouncing along. So Static immediately jumps into action. The Rubber Band Man is able to take the car and fling it into the air, but fortunately Static was able to bring it back down, as now the two of them have their first confrontation. And this is just the most like 90s dialogue I've ever heard. Because Static is like, yo, chill, man, chill. And Rubber Band Man is like, yo, I ain't got no beef with you, Static. And I was just like, let me translate this real quick in my head. I know what these mean. I do know what these mean.
Yeah, this is a great setup, because I know you just said the car was flung into the air, but we have to emphasize Rubber Band Man flung this limo about 30 stories into the air. Mm-hmm. So this is who we're dealing with. And Static immediately tries to shock him, of course, but Rubber Band Man's like, I'm a natural insulator. That's not going to work. So Virgil has to expand all of his powers to just subdue Rubber Band Man while Ice Pack gets away. And it leaves him completely open. And Rubber Band Man could end it right there for Static right there, but he says, again, my beef, that 90s beef. It's like, my beef isn't with you, but you just stay out of my way. And he bounces away.
Yeah, he really embodied the Optimus Prime Autobots roll out kind of statement there. So we cut to a scene now. Virgil's back at home. He's taking a shower. He's complaining about the fact that he just got whooped, as Sharon comes through knocking on the doors, yells out his full name. And this is just like, you just got to really appreciate how well they really capture basically the Black experience of growing up. Because whenever you hear somebody yell out your middle name with full government name, that's either you are in trouble or someone's playing games. And obviously this is just like a fun joke between the two of them, because Ashley's telling him for Virgil Ovid Hawkins to get his ashy butt out of that shower right now. It's just like, this is the dynamic that I really love to see between Virgil and Sharon. So Virgil heads downstairs after finally getting ready, and he's asking his father for an allowance, because naturally he's burning holes in his shoes and he's tearing all his costumes. So he doesn't want to tell them that. He's trying to say that it's like, oh, he just basically wants to do his own thing. Virgil's dad is just like, well, you know what? You have a lot of free time and you need to be more disciplined, which the irony of it, because it's just like, he's a full on superhero.
Exactly.
And tells him that he hooked him up with a friend of his who has a work-study program, which is basically a job at the DC Universe's McDonald's.
Yeah, and he has to wear Burger Fool. That's the name.
Burger Fool, yeah, Burger Fool.
He has to work at Burger Fool wearing a jester's hat. And I love, again, like how authentic this show feels, because Richie and his friends immediately clown him. Not like, they're not bullying him or anything, but they're just like, we got to clown you for wearing this hat and like working at Burger Fool. And while they're there, they're playing Ice Pack's new song, which is a legit bop. Like,
oh yeah,
I would listen to this song right now. And one guy gets up and is like, turn off that song, almost slaps the CD player out of their hands. Because if the CD player is loud enough to be heard in the restaurant,
yo, that was
right.
my biggest question. I was just like, I've never owned a CD player that had that much bass.
Yeah. You can hear that down the block. It's like, no way you're getting that sound quality. But it's of course revealed that the person that was so upset is Rubber Band Man in disguise, and again he uses his powers to shapeshift his clothes and into his costume. So you found out that, he stole, Ice Pack stole his track, he stole his beat and didn't give him any credit for it. So of course he just wants what's his. And he decides to go and get it from Ice Pack in another high point of the episode.
Yeah, Rubber Band Man heads on over to, I don't know, this was kind of like reminding me of Sam Goody. Just like all the throwbacks for y'all today. It's just like, yeah, he heads on over to the Sam Goody where Ice Pack is signing some of the records, and once again uses his shape-shifting capabilities to transform himself into somebody that probably might be a bit more appealing to Ice Pack to give him the time of day. And immediately upon transforming back into his regular self, he takes Ice Pack and takes him up to the top of the tower, this is already the tallest like record studio I've ever seen in my life. Like this thing is the Empire State Building. So
exactly.
He leaves him up there as he's questioning him, like, I know you stole from me. But Ice Pack telling him, like, no, I didn't steal from you. Somebody gave me the beat, which he then tells him who it is, but we don't find out until after Virgil and Richie are hanging out in Burger Fool. Virgil's like cleaning up. He's still on the clock. And he's like, you know what? At least we have some music to play, because at one point in all the hustle and bustle from when Rubber Band Man first exited Burger Fool, he dropped a CD. And as they're playing that CD, and once again, the CD player that has the surround system of a Bose, they hear the song that's playing and it's the same beat as Ice Pack's song, but they're like, how come there's no words? And then, they're wondering, like, maybe it's like the dance version to the song, but they're like, nah, this just dropped today. So like, how could they already make that so fast? And that's when they start putting two and two together, that Ice Pack stole the beat from Rubber Band Man. And that's what Rubber Band Man's been trying to find for this entire time. While Frida runs in and tells them that Rubber Band Man took Ice Pack and trapped him on top of the tower. So as Virgil heads on out, he tries to make an excuse to ask him for a break, which his boss immediately denies. So he says, let me throw out the trash. Let me spend the next like 30 minutes of our episode throwing out the trash now.
Yeah, this is a terrible work study program, by the way. Can't even take your break. So Virgil gets on his costume, saves Ice Pack from falling right in the nick of time. And he's like, wait a minute, Ice Pack, you're going to have to give me some information. Let me know where Rubber Band Man is going. And when Ice Pack does it, Virgil threatens to drop him out of the sky.
Son. That's that kind of torture that made Batman proud, yo. Like,
no wonder Batman is like, yo, Virgil, I see some promise in this kid. So Static finds out there's a record executive that is behind this whole thing. And we cut to Rubber Band Man confronting the executive. And in one of the best, again, this is such good interactions and dialogue in this episode, because when Rubber Band Man is like, you stole my thing. And the one goon goes, yeah, boss steals from a lot of people. And he goes like, yeah, I stole it fair and square. Like, what's up? But the executive recognizes his goons are not going to be able to do anything against Rubber Band Man. So he says, hey, Rubber Band Man, you know what? Here's my safe. Take as much money as you want, and we're going to work out a contract. And Rubber Band Man was like, all right. He starts like shifting his body so he can carry more money. And the executive closes the vault doors on him and lets him know in no uncertain terms he gonna die in there because it's gonna run out of air very soon.
As Rubber Band Man's trying to break his way out to basically no avail, Static is making his way over to this place where, adding to the canon of this now, because it does pop up a couple more times, Dakota Hills. It's like, it's like basically a really nice suburbs, kind of like Beverly Hills, but like a home residential area. It's like really nice. So he makes his way over. He breaks through the past all the goons and whatnot, and is able to talk with the record exec, telling him that, Rubber Band Man's on his way. You might be in danger. If anything, let me hang around to help you. And the record exec is just like, nah, we good. We got this. Fortunately, though, Rubber Band Man's been banging on the walls and been screaming a bit. So Static's able to hear that. And he's just like, oh, looks like he already got here before I did. And that immediately sees the turn in the record exec, who now tries to attack Static, as sending his goons, as Static's able to fend them off, as well as burn the door down so that Rubber Band Man could make his way through. This, however, leads to our conclusion of our episode, as the first thing that Rubber Band Man does is immediately attacks the record exec, putting his hands around him, making this like balloon out of his hands. It's like, let's see how you feel when you don't have any air to breathe.
I mean, fair. I mean, I can't be mad at him.
Right.
I just want to quickly mention that during that fight, at one point, Static attacks a dude, and the dude's like, my chain! Come on. Like, the dialogue in this episode, even the background lines is so great. But Static is able to distract Rubber Band Man long enough to get the record executive. He also drops one of the greatest insults, where he just is like, to the record executive, is like, they're going to need Lake Michigan to baptize you. Like, yo, Static, you roasted the people you try to save. And they have a competition in a playground, and Static ends up trapping Rubber Band Man onto what are those spinning things?
I also was trying to figure this out. I think it's a merry-go-round.
Yeah, it's a merry-go-round without the horses, and it's smaller. We could have researched this, but we didn't. But he traps him on there with glue because, I am rubber, you are glue, come on. And the record executive and Rubber Band Man go to jail for their various crimes. Mm-hmm. And at the end, Richie turns to Static and goes like, why didn't you take the money? And Virgil's simple. He's like, superheroes don't take money. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and Richie's like, that's great, but also you got fired from your job. Because this is the worst work study program ever.
Oh, man. And he also tried to give Virgil a bit of a consolation prize. He said, he was like, yo, I did head on over to the record studio and I was able to pick up Ice Pack's album for you, which Virgil immediately takes and throws in the trash. And like, if I was Richie, I would have been like, so there's a 30-day return policy on that. Can I get that back though?
After the credits, he went back and got the CD. And
it's the unofficial post-credit
Guitar
scene.
Center. Or FYE, whatever. Circuit City, that's where he brought it back to.
So that wraps up our first episode here. As our going to our next episode called The New Kid, Virgil and Richie are now in home ec. They're working on the souffle, which unfortunately collapses like as soon as it makes its way outside.
Yeah. Virgil's tries to get a little bit of static to stimulate the molecules and make the souffle rise. I guess that's how chemistry works. I didn't do too well in it, so I don't know. And
I didn't do too well in home ec. I just knew about the eating part. So like that sounds right to me.
If you had a taser, maybe it would have gone differently for you.
What is he now, Batman with Cyborg?
Exactly. But everything is interrupted because his teacher comes in and says the principal wants to see him immediately. And not only is the principal in the office, but his dad is in the office. So you're like, yo, what did he do?
Mm-hmm. So as they're in there with meeting with Principal Aguilar, who, I gotta say this real quick, this dude was too jacked for this position.
Yeah.
Like, he was way too defined to be a principal of the school.
It's like, you're not working in Freeland. Like, you don't have to fight Black Lightning villains, bro. It's Dakota. Like, you can chill.
So while in the office, the principal shares that, has Virgil ever heard of the Van Moore Institute, which Virgil shares as like, yeah, he's heard about it. It's a school for these like exceptionally gifted kids that you got to be like Stephen Hawking to get into. And this is, to me, it felt a little bit of like a backhanded compliment because he was like, well, I guess you don't have to be because you got in. And it's like, wow, Principal Aguilar, wow. So Virgil's so surprised. And I think my favorite moment of this, because it really, I had to pause it right here. Virgil's dad is sitting next to him and he immediately grabs him and it's just like, yo, I'm so proud of you, and kisses him on the cheek. Mm. And the main reason why I was surprised, because like, when you think about it, this show's probably from like this episode aired in like the 2000s. Yeah, 2000. So if we had to gauge it, Virgil's dad's probably, I don't know, like 50 at the time, maybe 40 or 50. That means he probably grew up in an era where it wasn't common for men to show affection, let alone emotions towards another man. So to have it kind of be that Virgil's dad, Robert Hawkins, is here, telling his son that he's proud of him, and even to the point where he kisses him on the cheek, I was like, that's a big step of expression of emotions within the Black community.
I definitely agree. It is. Robert has from the start always been a good father figure, firm, but for the right reasons. And you can see he has a lot of love for Virgil. So this is just continuing in things with these small little gestures. You can just see how dynamic and how great of a dad he is. And they keep running this, and he keeps expanding and growing. But yeah, this was a nice moment between them. That really the importance of it can fly right by, but it is hugely significant because you still watch 10 Black shows, come back to me and show me an example of this, and I bet you'll still have trouble because that is just something that you don't see every day.
Yeah, and even in a more shocking move right after, the principal tells him that like, yo, don't worry, we got you. I know, because ideally what's going to happen is that if Virgil takes part in this program, it's a six-week program that's going to be taking place at this other school, where he tells him that not only will you be learning everything that you need to learn there, we'll also hook you up with some tutors here at Dakota University or Dakota High so that you could keep up with your work. And I was just like, damn, is this what it's like to have resources?
I know. Dakota must have got some extra money from like all the big bank fallout that they could afford all this.
So now we jump to Virgil's first day at the Van Moore Institute. He's lost, obviously. He's like walking around. We see all these like different students and whatnot. So he finds two students who are posted up against a wall somewhere. He's asking them, it's like, hey, can you tell me where this lab 17 is? And obviously, they're upperclassmen because their first immediate thing to do is like to be jerks to him. And they're like, you can find it between 15 and 18 or something like that. So they basically kind of bully him there on the spot, even to the point of directing him outside of the building and locking him out, making him late to his like first day of school.
Yeah. And he eventually makes his way to class, meets Daisy, and meets these twin geniuses. And he's like, oh, where's the teacher? And of course, it's the upperclassmen, because at this institute, the upperclassmen teach the classes. So now he immediately has to contend with this duo that he already got spurned by. And it's just such a weird school. Like,
it really is. Like, it's so well funded, but at the same time, it's like no one is helpful.
Like, I was a TA in college. Let me tell you, I was not allowed to teach lessons. I was allowed to maybe run the PowerPoint, but I can guarantee you I was not teaching any classes. And I was in college. So this school's got some weird things going on. But Static doesn't have much time to worry about the school because there's a Transformer attacking the town. More like a Decepticon, am I right?
Yeah. So as Static is hanging out at the abandoned gas station of Solitude with Richie, he's telling him about his day and everything that he's learned. And, there's a little quick moment there in which Richie's like, yo, you've been kind of talking about Daisy for a minute now. Like, Frida then lost your attention or something? But before he can answer, that's when our Decepticon starts barreling through, shooting up the streets of Dakota. And Static immediately jumps into action as he tries to take out the machine, but he notices that it doesn't really get affected by most of his static electricity. And at one point, it even sends out these like tentacles and drains him of his powers.
Yeah, he really gets backed into a corner and he's essentially forced to run into an alley, kind of like in a mirror to the first episode where he's just trying to escape from bullies without powers. And he finds a fuse box, luckily, and he gets a Super Saiyan charge, again, the classic Super Saiyan charge, and is able to turn things right around at the last minute, get one over on the robot in a clever scene. And then you find out this attack was not random.
No, it was not, because we have I know their names are Specs and Trapper, but I'm going to call them Smart and Smarter, because these two, it's clear now that the robot is actually a suit of armor being manipulated by one of them, while the other one is back at the lab monitoring the entire situation. The next day, Virgil's back at the Institute. He's being tested by everybody. There's a really great bonding moment that he has with like Daisy and the other two, the twins that are there. But while they're enjoying their day, the two upperclassmen walk through and they're like, hey, we want you to build an electronic eye that's capable of tracking electromagnetic energy signatures wherever it might be dialed into. And I love this moment here because like they kept clowning them and being like, is that too hard for you underclassmen to do? Like you grunts really can't even comprehend anything like this. And if every day that is late, it's a letter off your grade. And Virgil's just like, yeah, you know what? This does sound like a pretty hard task, but can I just ask one question before you go? Do you want the eye to be brown, black, or baby blue? And I was just like, that finesse of that burn was so good.
Virgil's extra superpower. He just keeps coming with those burns. He doesn't need the electricity. He just has those burns going all day. And as he's building that program out, we find out that these Trapper Smarter and Smarter are being funded by Alva. All comes back down to Alva Industries. They released the gas, and now Alva wants to study static a little bit closer in comfortable ways. So he's basically funding their project to go and capture static alive. He specifically wants him alive.
Yeah. There's a dark moment there. It's just like, it'll be easier if we just kill them. And it's just like, whoa, you can't just be you throwing around the unalive word like that.
2000, you can do whatever you wanted.
Yeah. So back in the lab, the students have finally built the eye, mainly because Virgil's able to program it really well based off a video game that he and Richie had developed when they were younger. Again, just like the smarts on these two. So Virgil and Daisy are now leaving. But as they're heading out, and they're kind of like bonding, kind of like it's like not really even understanding that they're flirting with each other. Mm-hmm. Virgil sees a limo pass by and the window's down. So he peeks in and he sees that Edwin Alva is leaving the school. And he's so shocked. And that's when Daisy reveals to him that Edwin Alva funds this whole school. It's his way of finding like the next genius and whatnot, which I gotta say is like a really great callback to the history of Edwin Alva in Milestone Media, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and also the fuller Milestone episode. So Virgil's like, you know what? I forgot something in the lab. He wants to head back and check it out. But honestly, it's just really his way of finding if he can get some more information about maybe like the Big Bang, really find out what Edwin Alva's real influence is with the labs. And as Daisy is just like, you know, I could go with you. He's like saying don't, but she still ends up tagging along anyway.
After some classic Virgil shenanigans where he's like, look over here while I break into the lab with my powers.
The master of misdirection.
They get down into the lab. They find a secret passageway and they expose Smart and Smarter. They see that the program is going to be used to track Static. And funnily enough, he's right there underneath their noses. And eventually Smart and Smarter turn around. They realize they're being watched. And I love, oh my God, I laughed so hard at this tiny moment. But while Daisy is running away, Virgil throws an AV cart at Smart, and Smart like goes tumbling down like 3 stories of stairs. Like, Virgil, that could kill people. You gotta be careful about that.
So Static is able to get out. Daisy's also able to get out. But unfortunately, Smart and Smarter are able to turn on the Alva machine, which honestly seems like a dumb name to me. Like, I could have gone with anything else. Like, the sole purpose is to catch Static. And I feel like you could have called it, I don't know, like what catches lightning?
The lightning rod. We'll workshop it. We can come up with something better than that.
So as the machine breaks its way out, basically destroying the entire school, it starts targeting Daisy, and Static is able to swoop in and pull Daisy out of the way, flying her away, and he's pulling up the appearances like he just got there. He doesn't know anything that's going on. He's joking around with her. And as Static drops off Daisy, she sees, which is really well timed, she happens to see the 2 twins that were in the class with them. And she's like, hey, we need to head back to school because we need to find a way to shut down the machine. While Static is spending this entire time now trying to avoid it. And he's realizing little by little that he built basically the technology that's being used in this machine. And he's trying to figure out the best way to get rid of it, which he does by heading over to Dakota Hills once again to find the home of Edwin Alva.
Circuit Breaker. That should be the name of the robot.
Circuit Breaker, yes.
See how easy that was? So yes, he decides to go towards Alva because he figures, Alva probably doesn't want this robot in his house. So he just charges right in, destroys this man's house. Because Static there is no limit to the collateral damage Static will cause as a superhero. And now they're like, do we attack Alva? Because he's our boss. Like, we can't attack him. And while Smart and Smarter are trying to figure out what to do, Daisy comes in with a massive save and pulls a crucial wire that would connect to the circuit breaker. So the circuit breaker goes tumbling into a pool. Static throws Alva in the pool after him, which it could electrocute you. Virgil.
Right. Like, that was a deadly move, bro.
As the robot goes offline, we cut back to weeks later where they're back at Dakota High and Daisy is transferred because her parents believe she'd be safer in a public school. The jokes in this episode. But it does establish that now Daisy will be a regular character and Virgil is safely away from any circuit breakers.
And that ends the episode, The New Kid, episode 6. As we jump into our last episode today, Child's Play. We have confirmed there's been no Chucky in this, but we do know that the end is near because we open up to the Freeman Community Center where a pastor is basically preaching about the end of days. And this right here is this week's DC reference. So any fans of the Watchmen series, comic book, or movie will know that there is a random person who walks around between the panels throughout the entire story who has a sign saying the end is nigh. And honestly, this sign gets used so often in DC stuff. This time is called The End is Near, but that is the DC reference of the day because we see here in DC's Watchmen comic by Alan Moore that this sign is once again being used to talk about the fact now that the presence of bang babies or just general life stuff means that the end is near.
Yeah, I mean, it is fair. That would rock you a little bit, your whole belief system, if a bunch of kids with superpowers showed up. So I get how it might send them over the edge. But another sign of the things are going downhill is that the fountains are running red. And as they go to the fountains, they find it's cherry soda. And the priest just turns to the sky and goes, man, what you got against me?
Just the commentary and the dialogue in this show, this series is so great. Because this is also expanding on the mythos of Static, as we find out now that his father actually runs and operates the community center, because Static is there asking his dad for some money once again. We cut to school now, where Virgil, Richie, and Daisy are walking down the hallways, and they're talking about the incident about the fountain turning into this like cherry soda thing. Daisy tells them a story about how at Fenton Projects, that they had a very similar case where it just automatically started snowing. And at first, Richie and Virgil kind of write it off, but then she drops that like it started snowing ice cream, which is like, where are all these like childlike things just popping up and happening in Dakota? So unfortunately, they're not able to really find out really what happened after that, as they see an old classmate of theirs, Aaron Price, who Richie clearly has some problems with, but Virgil's just like, you know what, I'm going to extend the olive branch, because even though he has this like past history of being sent to reform school, clearly, I guess because he's done something that needed to be reformed, he wanted to at least, welcome him back to school. Unfortunately, Aaron basically produced a shoulder colder than the ice cream that was being dropped in Fenton Projects.
Oh yeah, that he is just not having any of Virgil, and immediately slams the locker in his face. And we're left wondering, like, Virgil, why'd you even try? Like, I guess he's kind, but what's going on? And this interaction comes up later, but for now we go to a gym where the community center gym, where we see this kid just wanting to play basketball with everybody else, but they're just not having him. They're like, your hops are too bad. You can't shoot. you shoot free throws worse than Shaq. Like, we're just not going to have you on the team. And they're like, oh, the dunk bots, the dread bot would be like a good player. And all of a sudden, the dread bot bursts through the gym. And I had to write this note exactly, but that gym is screwed. Like, there is no way. When I saw that gym get ravaged by this dread bot, I'm like, this community center is going to be offline for months.
So one quick thing I want to drop in there real quick before we move on. Andrew, did you pick up on the adult joke that got dropped in that episode?
Oh, I mean, there were a couple. Which one are you thinking?
So the main conversation that we see amongst the kids is like, one kid makes a shot and he's just like, I should play just like Wilt Chamberlain. And the kids are just like, who is that? So the kid explains that, like, his basketball player, his dad, grandpa told him about him, and then proceeds to say that his grandma knew about him too. It just ends it right there. So, yeah, this is outside DC knowledge. If you ever heard the rumor about Wilt Chamberlain and his extracurricular activities of engaging in relations, he currently has a count of 20,000, according to the rumor.
I mean, good on somebody for keeping track of all that. Like, that seems like it would need like multiple spreadsheets and a phone book, especially in those days.
Right. And unfortunately, it seems that this kid's grandma might have added to the count from the joke that they tried to put forward in this television series.
Again, some of the throwaway lines in Static are better than written jokes for full-length movies. It's amazing.
So going back now, Dreadbot 3000 has entered the gymnasium. It has destroyed everything. Robert Hawkins bursts through to find out what all the commotion is about, shows off that clearly that heroics is genetic in the Hawkins family, as he's able to save a kid. But then immediately Virgil and Richie are making their way over and they see all the commotion, recognizing that Dreadbot is a video game character. So they're trying to figure out what's going on. Static does his power up, and as he's trying to fight the Dreadbot, he realizes that the Dreadbot is immune to any static electricity that he produces. It sends its way.
Yeah, so he is he's pretty screwed in this. Unlike the gym, he's pretty screwed. But fortunately, before things get too hairy, things start to calm down. And we realized the boy from earlier, Dwayne, had something to do with this. He brought the Dreadbot into life. And his older brother, Aaron, from earlier, realizes, if my brother can do that, what else could I get him to do? So you get this really interesting dynamic where Aaron starts manipulating his brother Dwayne to let him to try to advance his goals. And it's interesting because you're not seeing a direct villain. You're just seeing someone being taken advantage of because Dwayne just so desperately wants a connection with his brother, stepbrother, as Aaron will keep emphasizing. But the only way he can do that is by following what his older brother wants to do. And in this case, he wants him to steal a bunch of stuff.
Yes. And we immediately see that our heroes, Virgil and Richie, also find out about this. Not necessarily that of what Dwayne's abilities are, nor that Aaron is manipulating him, but while trying to figure out, who attacked the center, they look into the records that are available there of all the people who come in and notice that Dwayne is one kid who's there who they did see that just hasn't been accounted for. So they make their way over to Fenton Projects because they found out that that's where he lived. And in a conversation with his mom, they find out that Dwayne was actually near the incident of the Big Bang. And she's under the impression that Dwayne wasn't affected at all. She believes that during the time that he went out looking for their lost dog, he was able to immediately avoid the entire incident. Virgil and Richie head back out because now that they have some information, their next quest is to figure out how can they talk to Dwayne and figure out if he's actually the one creating all these things. But at that moment, that's when Dwayne and Aaron have teamed up to try to steal money from a bank because Aaron told Dwayne that the bank harmed him at one point, and they've been doing things to harm people that he even loves, including his mother and Mr. Hawkins.
Yes. So again, kids easily manipulated, and he sends this honestly terrifying cartoon sumo character into the bank. And I have no confirmation for this, but I would like to think that he was voiced. The sumo's grunts were voiced by Phil Lamar, and before.
I heard it. I definitely heard it.
That's my headcanon. I haven't checked it, but I just feel it's right. And this sumo is tearing up the bank, just destroying the bank. Of course, Static comes on the scene and tries to do what he can, but he nearly gets crushed to pieces by this sumo creation. And it's only after this incident, after this near brush of death with this imaginary creature, that Dwayne starts realizing, like, hey, wait a minute. Actual people got hurt. You wanted to steal this money. And starting to realize that his brother's love comes with a severe cost.
Yeah, so Aaron's able to manipulate him once again as they start running away. Static and Richie are able to see this moment. And then that's when they finally put two and two together, that Aaron's been the one that's been manipulating Dwayne this entire time. And Virgil and Richie are just trying to figure out, like, what do they do? Because this is such a delicate case. This isn't a typical villain where we can easily just punch him and shock him, and that's how we end our episode. This is a case of someone manipulating someone, and they need to use their words this time in order to break through and show this kid the truth. So Virgil heads on over to the community center where Dwayne is playing basketball by himself, and the two of them are trying to talk. And as Virgil kind of like brings up that, like, yo, like, how is your relationship with Aaron? Because I know he's went through a lot and whatnot, but it does seem like he's been saying and doing things that aren't exactly on the up and up. And immediately Dwayne kind of reveals his abilities as his eyes glow purple. He doesn't create anything, but it gives Virgil enough time to just walk away. And that's when Virgil and Richie are just like, okay, we now know that he's definitely being manipulated, but we need to figure out a way to show Dwayne that Aaron isn't really looking out for his best efforts, which they decide to do so back at school as Virgil once again tries to talk with Aaron and invites him to a fake party that he's throwing in an effort to get Aaron to reveal that he doesn't really think that much of Dwayne.
Yep, and it absolutely works.
Mm-hmm.
He is absolutely exposed, and it just speaks to the theme throughout this whole episode. We see how Robert really has put himself out there to make sure these kids are being taken care of. And Virgil's actions just reflect that he's learning from his father, and he goes the extra mile to try to save this kid. And fortunately, they're able to get through, capture the brother, send him right back to reform school because he clearly ain't learned no damn thing.
Facts.
And this give Dwayne another chance to be a normal kid and not use his God-breaking powers for evil. Because those, if he properly harnessed those, oh my God, those powers are insane.
Word. So those are our 3 episodes. Lightning round again. Favorite episode and least favorite episode.
This was a hard one to pick a favorite because they're all like really, really fun episodes in different ways. But I think the one that just had me laughing the most and was just so entertaining, I think the Rubber Band Man episode. I think you have a sympathetic villain in Rubber Band Man who, he's just wants to get his money. That's all he wants.
Yeah, just pay the brother.
Yeah, and it's a fun mystery that comes together for Virgil, and just the fight scenes, just a man being pulled by the chain. I think that's what it is. A man got pulled by his chain, and I just can't forget it. I can't let it go. What's the best of the bunch for you?
Best of the bunch for me, I would say that the Playing My Song was a close one, but I have to give it to Child's Play. I think it really kind of showed who Static is. Once again, kind of just like he's going to be the guy that's going to be able to talk things through. But more importantly, he's not just using his powers and his taser punch as we, from like the first episode. He's like really trying to show that heroism can be done just by using your words sometimes. And the fact that it showed us that our villain wasn't once again a giant monster, even though he was able to create them. It was kind of cool to see that, like, hey, all right, we have this kid here who's in trouble. And it really just shows that Static is here for helping out the at-risk youth, which is really just like a really cool concept to introduce in a like 22-minute episode to just really see that all play out.
Yeah. So I guess we're both mutually agreed that just because of where it's positioned in this one, that the new kid falls up short. And again, this is not really a fault of the episode. It's not saying that this is a lackluster or a boring episode by any means. There are some logical leaps in this episode that you just have to go with.
Yeah.
How did they get the funding for the school? How old are these upperclassmen? Did they get arrested in the end? Or did they just keep on teaching Monday morning after all this? I'm not sure. The episode doesn't answer any of those questions. So.
Yeah, I felt the same way. There was like, I'm realizing now that maybe the reason why he did it, the circuit breaker didn't really shock the waters, because I do remember there was a scene in which they explained that the casing of it was made out of like a ceramic of some kind. But at the same time, what this episode was kind of really did take me out a little bit of just like, all right, I get it. This is definitely one of those like 90s kind of episodes of just like taking the kid and putting him into the new gifted school kind of thing. And it was just like they needed to have some kind of conflict. I do appreciate that we got a chance to be introduced to Daisy because she does pop up in the comics. But at the same time, it was just like, this was a bit of a slower episode compared to the others, which had a little bit more depth and has you kind of like thinking differently about, the world that Static has to face. But yeah, one of the major themes that I kind of saw in this episode, which is actually going to influence my comic book section, are just kind of like, now we're diving into just like who are the villains of that Static is going to have to face. Like last week, we got introduced to Hot Streak and Ebon, who are like two of Static's greatest villains. But here we got kind of more of the, the big bad of the week kind of person. Like we got introduced to a Rubber Band Man, who honestly just seemed to be more of a guy who was just trying to catch a break after getting some bad luck when he got his record, his music, and basically his money stolen from him. So even though he was doing evil things to get his recognition back, his motivations behind it all is understandable. Then we have like Edwin Alva and Specs and Trapper, Smart and Smarter, who these guys are villains. Like from the very beginning, they were just evil. They had malicious intent. They had malicious actions. And obviously this is why they had to end up going to jail, possibly. We don't know, because once again, they're just left behind as Static just flies away. And then finally, Dwayne McCall, who we got pictured to be the bad guy, because once again, he's the one with the superpowers. But like Rubber Band Man, he's just kind of like, once again, the kid that just got a bad rap. And he, his brother Aaron truly is the real true villain, because we just spent a whole episode finding and seeing how he's manipulating his brother for his own reasons. And I think like these episodes of Static really help to show that like Static isn't going to be your typical hero facing off against someone who's just focused in on world domination. It's going to be people who are, like definitely are evil and do want to do that world domination thing, but also some people who just like weren't lucky, or people who were just misguided because they're being fed the wrong information. And those are problems that doesn't need for you to resolve them by using your fist or kick or superpowers. Sometimes it's just words.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to instill so early on, because there's 100 shows of superhero shows where they got to punch their way out. Daredevil's the kind of guy, he's not talking through anything, or Punisher. But it is refreshing to see, especially in when you have a radical new character, that they have a radical new approach. Why don't I just talk it out and see what we can do?
All right. Now, those were our episodes. Now it's time for that comic book knowledge, as today's set of comics are influenced by Beast Boy and Teen Titans Go, as the theme of it all dials down back again into villains. So out here, we're catching villains. As I mentioned, Static has a lot more villains in his role gallery that we haven't seen quite yet, but we will be seeing soon. But I'm going to really focus in on the two that we did see in this episode, and a main one from the comics. The first one we got introduced to was Rubber Band Man. He was first introduced into the Static comics in Static number 33 in March of 1996 in the comic Be My Love. In that one, he really just had more of a cameo appearance towards the end of the comic, after Static had already defeated the big bad of that one. But by comic number 34, that's when he and Static actually fought. So the character Rubber Band Man at the time was actually named Cameron Stringer. Real quick, I want you, Andrew, to remember that name. I want the people out there, the listeners, to remember that name, because it's actually going to circle back to us at some point.
All right. Write it down in my notes.
And Cameron Stringer was a small-time crook that got turned into a bang baby. And after the whole incident, there was a talk show that was created where Big Bang victims were able to come on to the show and talk about the emotional distress that they had following the events of the Big Bang. So it's kind of like, I don't know, like the Montel of the Dakotaverse, kind of.
The Ricky Lake, if you will. The Ricky Lake.
The references in the old schools just keeps on coming. So Stringer on that show called out Static, and that's how number 33 ended, with them once again fighting in issue number 34. He didn't really pop back up much later on in comics for Static, like maybe only about 2 more issues. In fact, they completely revamped his character for the TV show. So that was with the inclusion of a background change. They also added this purple suit that he was wearing, because before he mostly just had a leather jacket and this was like really slick back hair. And then they also changed his name to Adam Evans in honor of Cameron Stringer's actual creators, Adam Blaustein and Yves Vazani, who took over the Static series of issue number 30. And if you're trying to find some more Rubber Band Man, unfortunately, you're not going to be really able to find much more. He doesn't really pop up in comics after the initial Static run. He does get mentioned a couple times when Static was introduced to the DC universe and got his own New 52 run. But once again, he's only just like mentioned in those series. It's just like, hey, he's off to the side doing his own thing, and or villainry or something like that.
He's studying abroad in Gotham.
Our next villain is Edwin Alva, or more formally known as Edwin Alva Sr., and he is the CEO of Alva Technologies, which is different than our Alva Industries in the TV series. So, despite being one of the main antagonists in the Static Shock TV series, he's actually not a static villain at all. The two of them don't cross paths.
What?
Yeah, this was such a mind trip for me because I just always associate the two of them together. But Edwin Alva got first introduced in Milestone's comic book hero Hardware, got introduced in Hardware #1 back in April of 1993. And for the majority of that series, he is the adversary of Hardware, this other superhero who we'll talk about a bit more in our Milestone episode. So just like in the show, however, Alva was this like really great business guy who, was very popular in the public eye, but behind closed doors, he was involved in a lot of illegal dealings to the point where, he probably was basically running the criminal underworld of Dakota.
Someone's got to do it.
So Hardware, this superhero that I mentioned, he took on the task of taking down Edwin Alva, which is why I think that's why they kind of introduced Edwin Alva here, because their battles kind of like echoed one another. The way that Edwin Alva and Hardware fought is much like how Static and Alva fight in the TV series. Also, Edwin Alva isn't even responsible for the Big Bang in the comics.
Oh, like just a random dude.
Yeah, it was just two random people. But basically, I think the only reason why they wanted to make Edwin Alva the TV villain was because, going back to the fact like Static was created to be this like Spider-Man archetype, we needed a Norman Osborn. And if Edwin Alva isn't Norman Osborn in disguise, like I don't know what to tell you. Like the only thing he's missing is the glider and the green suit. Again, Edwin Alva wasn't responsible for the Big Bang, didn't have any connection to the gas. There was these two other characters, Dr. Kilgore and Dr. Nemo in the Static comics, who probably they tried to connect Edwin Alva to be more like him because Dr. Kilgore wanted to test Static's blood, and Dr. Nemo was the actual creator of the Big Bang gas, which gets this other really weird name. I think it's called the quantum juice.
Oh, yeah, the Q vapor or something like that.
Yeah, Q vapor. So it wasn't until, however, right now with Milestone returning into the DC universe, Milestone Returns #0 that we mentioned last week's recommended reading, that is when they finally put two and together that Edwin Alva was responsible for the Big Bang and for the creation of the gas, so that's to create more of a connection to the show, because once again, this is a show that so many people grew up on, and the way that we're just shocked now, even finding out that Edwin Alva wasn't involved in the Big Bang in the original comics, I guess maybe they wanted to make sure that to solidify that connection. And plus it makes more sense a little bit now. So Now that we know that Edwin Alva isn't Static's biggest villain, Andrew, who do you think? Who would you give that title to?
It's probably gonna be that the amoeba from last week's episode. I think the 1% of germs that escaped is probably his greatest foe. No,
no, it's not. It's this other villain named Holocaust.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so there's another Bang baby by the name of Holocaust who got his powers the same way. He's a part of the Blood Syndicate. This is another Milestone creation in the comic books where there were two gangs that we saw that were affected in the Big Bang incident, the Paris Island Bloods and the Force Syndicate. So the remaining people, the ones that actually got superpowers and didn't die during the Big Bang from both of these gangs, decided to come together to form this new gang called the Blood Syndicate in order to protect their block. And Holocaust was one of the members who eventually tried to fight to become the leader of the Blood Syndicate. But we quickly see in their first issue that premiered in April of 1993 that he was quickly taken out and kicked out of the club. he decides that he wants to go out there and try to create his own version of the gang so that he can finally take back control. And just kind of like in our meta breed episode, our breed episode from last week, he does a similar thing to Static, where he asks Static to, he like teams up with him, fights along with him, just like, hey, you know, we work well together. You should really join my crew because I'm trying to put together a gang of metahumans. Because, you know, obviously you're not out here really having much luck on your own. You know, you could probably use some money, which we see echoing out a lot in this episode. So Static really actually decided to join forces with him for one battle. But after seeing how dangerous it got, he backed away and was just like, no, I need to not join this gang for the sake of money. This is something that I need to step away from. Obviously, this leads into a big battle between the two, where we actually see them fight in Static number 4, which is appropriately named Playing with Fire. But there's a lot of like same kind of like mindset and manipulation that Holocaust did with Static that we see a lot with Ebon and how he interacts with the rest of the Bang Babies in the Static Shock series. And, you know, I can probably understand why they didn't want to go with Holocaust.
Couple reasons, at least two. At least two.
Yeah. And one of those 2 reasons is he had a very similar power set to Hot Streak. So it probably would have been confusing for people to be like, well, Static's only villains are basically people with fire. So it's just like, what's the case for that? However, he does get his animated appearance finally. We actually have seen him, if you've been catching up with or keeping up with Young Justice. He's in 2 episodes of season 3 of Young Justice Outsiders.
Yeah, so if you haven't had your fill, there you go. You can find him there.
And you'll also find Static there because he does pop up. He has a revamped like story and origin story and all that. But you know, if you want to find some, but honestly, this route that they went with, this comic with like just reading about Holocaust and finding out more about the Blood Syndicate was kind of cool. Who not only will they be receiving their own new comic in the Milestone Returns in the new universe that they're creating, I think they're also planning on including them in the animated film that was announced in DC Fandom. If not them, we're definitely going to see the rest of these heroes, especially like Hardware, who has more of this connection to Edwin Alpha. So we'll definitely see some stuff there. And yeah, that's it. That's our comic book history. Those are our villains. We've got a little bit of a history there, how they're going to cross paths with Static, how some of their characterization kind of like influenced the television series, as well as Static's own journey in becoming a hero in his original run of the 45 comics that he had. But, you know, I know that we kind of cut this one like 1 episode short, but that's because next week's episode honestly is too powerful to have lumped together with just like another episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good time to take some of the spotlight and put it fully on 8. We really want to break down episode 8 as its own thing. It's not just like a serialized thing that was thrown in there. We want to give it time, and we got time. We got space. This is what we can do whatever we want. We're Static.
Exactly.
Just like Static destroying Dakota, we can change things up when we need to.
Well, until then, y'all, take care. And don't forget that if you try to steal music from anybody, at least give them some credit, I guess.
Yes, the feet next to the title descriptions of your songs, that's there for a reason. All right? Sample, don't steal.
Now that we've finished talking about our DC animated content, here are some recommended readings for you. All of these comics and more can be found at your local comic shop, so remember to venture out and support your part of the source wall. And tell them Andrew and Shamar sent you. We shared Static number 4, number 33, and number 34 in our episode. However, if you really want to see more about the man behind the crime in our Static Shock Dakota, then check out the Hardware Series 1993 and Hardware Season 1. Despite focusing on the titular hero, these stories give some great insight on who Edwin Alva is, his history, and his journey of corruption. That's all for our list. Thank you for listening, and be sure to rate, review, and follow yet another DC animated podcast. Also, interact with us on social media for news on upcoming content. Take care, and we'll see you for the next issue.